I really need to learn how to become more concise because this is the fourth time I've recorded this, and the past two times because I spoke way too long. So let's try it again. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel, in which today I am trying to talk about Squid Game in a way that's not going to end up being 30 minutes long. If you haven't heard of Squid Game, I really suggest going to watch it because Cliff Notes, it is great. It subverts some of your expectations while living up to others. It is a scathing analysis of capitalism, and it's great. So, spoilers from here on out. It is a Netflix show that is 9 episodes long. It is a Korean drama, and I really thought it was going to be like those Japanese movies where you have like a bunch of high schoolers trapped in a school trying to play children's games and getting killed. It's kind of like that, except you have people of all ages. It's in Korea, and these people choose to stay. That's right. They have a clause in their contract where if majority people decide they want to stop, then they can stop. And in fact, that happens after the first game. Every Most everyone ends up coming back, and by most everyone, I mean of the over half of people that weren't killed by the first game, most everyone comes back because we started with 456 players and we ended up with like 201 at the end of the first game who voted to stop, and then like 190 or so decided to come back. It's insane. They're insane. But these people are in life threatening amounts of debt. Like people like our protagonist is just sold the rights to his body if he doesn't pay things back in a month, and almost had his nose blood turned into blood soup. Yeah. Um, Jackass and personification of capitalism, corruption. Um, Sangwoo is in such deep shit because he committed massive amounts of fraud and is wanted by the police. And he put his mom's shop up as collateral. We have a North Korean refugee who snuck into South Korea and is trying to get her mom out of North Korea and her brother out of an orphanage. And it goes on from there. So, yeah, everyone's in a massive amount of debt. They want to break out of it. And the world is so hellish that even after they witnessed so many people dying and barely survived themselves, they decide the game is better than living out here. So I want to go over the games very briefly. That seems to be what takes the most amount of time for me to talk about, is the entire events of the show, because this is a 9 episode long show and I'm trying not to go too deep into depth now. There's 6 games. You have the first one is red light, green light, and then they stop playing. Then everyone comes back. The second game is called Honeycomb. And for people not familiar, because I'm sure not with most of these games, you have a piece of sugar that is in a circle, and an image is stamped into it. It can be like an umbrella, star, triangle, circle. I think that's it. And the goal is to carve your shape out of the sugar without breaking it. Of course, if you break it in this version, you die. After the second game, everyone goes to bed. There's a bloody fight where many more people get killed. It's insane. I wasn't expecting that. And then we go on to the third game, which is Tug of War. This version of Tug of War includes such wonderful highlights as a drop high enough that you most certainly will die, though not necessarily. You have to pull your opponents off of their ledge entirely, then hold them there while you wait for a guillotine to drop down on the rope and chop it so that they can fall to their deaths. Handcuffs to the rope so you can't simply let go. And a really old man who turns out to be really good at tug of war. The fourth game involves marbles and really highlights that Songwoo is a piece of shit, and once again the personification of the corruption of capitalism, as he tricks resident babyface Ali, a Pakistani refugee, who didn't even know what odds or evens meant in Korean, tricks him into giving up all of his marbles, and Ollie doesn't even figure it out till the very end. Um, the fourth game includes jumping from glass pane to glass pane, trying to figure out which ones are tempered and thus strong enough to hold up to people, or will break instantly and once again drop you from a great height. Again, terrifying. And the last game is the eponymous Squid Game, in which I don't fully get the rules, but there is a vague shape of a squid, and you have to tap the head and shout victory to win, while the defender has to try and push you out of bounds. So, with that quick rundown, let's go into some of the stuff that is nuts. Starting with the cop. Not an arc I expected to see in any of this. After everyone decides to leave after the first game, our protagonist goes to the cops and tries to report them for kidnapping. Doesn't work. But this one cop has been looking for his brother and runs into this similar business card. He's like, oh, I saw that at the station. I'm going to call the station and be like, hey, where did this happen? He ends up following everyone to the island because the games take place in a bunker on an island, and he starts looking for his brother. He narrowly avoids getting found out a few times, watches one of the participants to the game being a Korean doctor who is being used by some of the pink-suited henchmen to harvest organs for the black market, freak out, kill someone, run away, and then get killed himself. So our cop sees all that happen, finds out that his brother did participate in the games, and ultimately finds out that his brother is the head honcho of the pink-suited dudes, though not the host himself. So that's his arc. He ends up getting shot in the shoulder and falls off a cliff into the ocean. I really thought we would see him come back, but no. The games actually continue on after the show ends, so yeah. Other things of note, at the end of the series, our protagonist, of course, is the one to survive, and you get to see some of the aftermath in which, despite having all of this money, he goes home. His mother is dead because, by the way, part of the reason why he entered the game the second time is because his mother's foot had deteriorated and she collapsed and was in the hospital, but they couldn't afford the hospital bills, so she refused to stay. She died while he was in the games, and he just lays down with her and cries, and it is vaguely traumatic. And a year later, he is looking vaguely like a hobo, though he still lives in a house and his clothes are clean. And you can tell he's having some sort of PTSD, depression. I'm surprised he ever wants to leave his house again. I would be agoraphobic, but you get to deal with that bit of aftermath. Other things to note, the old man. The old man had a brain tumor and was apparently dealing with dementia or worrying about it coming on. He supposedly dies during the marble game, but he comes back a year later. Turns out he was the host of the whole game, and the reason he was participating was because he wanted to have fun. They end up he and the protagonist have a little bet about this homeless dude that's outside, that no one's going to help him before midnight. And old man was almost right, but someone had went and alerted the cops and were able to get him into a cop car to hopefully find someplace warm to stay the night, which was a nice moment in this otherwise capitalist hellscape. Speaking of capitalist hellscape, let's talk about Sang-woo. Sang-woo is probably the most obvious metaphor throughout the entire production because he was our protagonist's childhood friend. In fact, our protagonist brags that he is somewhat responsible for Sang-woo being as great as he is because he helped make sure that Sang-woo got to school every day and all of that stuff. They played games together as kids, then Sang-woo ended up being really incredibly bright, He looks every bit the stereotypical anime nerd. Like, think about Oron High School Host Club. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the dude with the glasses, that's Songwoo. I realized that Oron High School Host Club is Japanese and this was Korean, but please work with me here. I'm not trying to correlate everyone together. I'm just saying that's what he looks like. He even pushes his glasses up with his middle finger. How can I not see that? He is an anime nerd boy. Anyway, he went to some sort of prestigious university and got into some fancy firm. And he was supposed to be in the US. He lied to his mom about it because, again, everyone's deeply in debt and he is wanted by the police for fraud. And he is a jerk. You can see his levels of corruption because he is the first person to mention, hey, we can vote our ways out of this. This is before all the money is shown, like how much they could win. Because they're like, we'll tell you how much you can win after the first game. Songwoo was like, okay, let's not do this. Square leader dude, because all of our pink suited people have shapes. The squares seem to be the most in charge underneath our main head honcho who wears black. So Square dude's like, all right, you want to put everything to a vote, we'll put it to a vote, but only after I show you how much money. They see how much money. It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. I did conversion to US money and I don't remember what it is now, but it's in the billions. It's money that I don't think Jeff Bezos would look down his nose at. Let's put it like that. And Songwoo is just like, holy shit, all that money. Okay, I'm going to vote against what I just said. I'm going to say, let's stay in the game. So that's the first little notion. There's also later on, he figures out what the second game is, the honeycomb game, where you have to like carve the shape out. And he figures it out before anyone else, and he's like, all right, I'm going to take the triangle. It's the easiest shape to carve out. And protagonist is like, cool, well, I'll do triangle. And he's like, no, it's better to split up. And then protagonist, again, childhood friend, goes to pick the hardest shape, and he almost stops him, but does not. Songwoo is a jerk. In the marble game, well, let's not go. In tug of war, he tried to get an all-male team and was immediately despondent when they had old man and then they had 2 girls. 3 girls. Women. 3 women. Or at least 2 women and a girl. One of them is really young. He was very despondent about that. Then the next game, he tricks our resident babyface Ali, who is a Pakistani refugee, into giving up all of his marbles. I really hate that about him. In the tile jumping game, he shoved someone because he wasn't making up his mind fast enough, and Songwoo didn't want to fucking die. And then at the very end, when protagonist and our North Korean refugee girl are trying to sleep but also not get murdered by each other, the North Korean refugee girl got stabbed by a piece of glass in the last game because right after the game timer ended, they shot all the glass with a lot of bullets and sprayed glass chunks everywhere, and one of them hit her in the gut, so she wasn't doing very well. Protagonist went to try and get her medical help, and while his back was turned, Songwoo went and like fucking stabbed her in the neck. Songwoo is a jerk. And during the last game, when it's just protagonist and Songwoo almost is able to agree to like not take the money just to end the game, let it be a majority. But he stabs himself. I think that was supposed to be his redeeming moment. But I don't know. I don't really like him. He ended up killing himself so that our protagonist would win and asked him to please take care of his mother. So I think that's most of the rundown. But Songwoo, holy shit, Songwoo. I just want to talk about him for a bit because his entire arc really highlights what I think the show is about. Because I haven't looked at any reviews really. The most I looked at is Wikipedia, and I saw something about it having an anti capitalist message and that sort of thing. And it is right, and it is through Songwoo, not even through the VIP characters who are disgusting because they're basically betting on people like you would on horses. Not the gross American gay man who tried to have the cop give him head. Um, that was uncomfortable. That was really uncomfortable. Um, no, I think it's best personified through Songwoo because you have a very bright kid grow up, make something of himself, and then you have him corrupted in the system. Like, you have these golden moment childlike years, but then they grow up and you think that he's successful. He is capitalism personified. Look at what capitalism can do. Look how good it is, but he's just as corrupt. Whereas our protagonist has clearly been through some shit. He was working at a like auto factory and people went on strike. He was part of the strike. It got busted. He watched someone die in front of him, and I think that led him to being like an alcoholic for a while, and he's still gambling and living off of his mother's money. So that is the very expected, "Ooh, this is the worst of the worst" message. This is what capitalism does to people. But you would think Songwoo would be a victory, but no, he's just as corrupted. He's fallen just as hard because he felt like he was put in these positions where he thought he had to lie and fraud people and take people's money from them. He used his own mother's store as collateral, and he was like, if I don't get this money, they will kill her. So that is a lot of what I think about. You can see these actions because he easily takes advantage of people's gullibility and willingness to believe the best in him. Our protagonist completely dismisses any idea that he could be a bad person until the very end when he literally sees Songwoo push someone out of the way so that he could get to the end safely. Songwoo's an interesting character. It's so easy to be mad at him because he killed a literal babyface. He killed two refugees if you think about it, because you have the person from Pakistan, Ali, and Ali, I don't know much about Pakistani law. I don't know much about Pakistan besides what I've read and watched online trying to learn more about like the Middle Eastern conflict and all of that. It's so complicated. But he was missing two fingers, so clearly he left Pakistan for a reason. And he had a wife and a small child, and Ali got taken advantage of by his employer. He wasn't paid for 6 months. That's part of why he's so deeply in debt, is he hasn't been paid in so long. And he returned to the game because he stole money from his employer to get his paychecks, and in the process accidentally got his. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think the lost fingers happened in Pakistan. I think it happened at work because he mentioned something about giving up his body for the job. And when he stole the money from his employer, he shoved his boss into one of the machines and it crushed his hand. So scratch everything I just said about Pakistan. He's still a Pakistani, like, he left Pakistan for a reason. But I think it was supposed to be that he lost his fingers at work. But we do have a genuine refugee from North Korea, and he stabs her in the neck and kills her before she even has a chance for the last game, right behind his friend's back, as soon as he left the girl's side to try and go get her medical attention. he kills her. And I mean, we know what capitalism does to people who are in desperate conditions like that. But I'm going to end it here because it's a really good show. I could probably talk about it for a while. If I want to talk about it, I should probably write myself a script so I stay on topic for more than a second. But if you've seen it, what do you think? If you haven't seen it and you're scared of blood, if you're squeamish, don't watch it. There's some parts where it's haha, that's obviously fake, but there's other parts like a dude digging a bullet out of someone's wound with a knife that's just uncomfortable. And I'm going to be thinking about that now. So, thank y'all so much for listening. I hope you have a fantastic day and stay hydrated. I'm going to go get a drink now because my throat hurts from talking so long.